The world is changing fast. Global power is shifting, new alliances are forming, and behind the scenes, every major power is trying to strengthen its position on this one continent, Africa. And not for the sake of moral obligation or charity like some people would like you to believe,
just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians,
but for influence, resources, and control. Because the truth is, Africa may be one of the most important pieces of the global economy moving forward, while still being one of the least organized politically and economically. And if Africans don't begin fixing these key structural issues now, then just like in the past, the next global era would be built with African resources without truly benefiting the African people. So in this video, I want to break down the 3 biggest things that I believe are holding the continent back. The things that if we find a way to change, could completely alter Africa's position in the world over the next few decades. But before we even get into those problems, I think we first need to change the way we look at Africa itself. Because to understand why this moment matters so much, you first have to understand what Africa truly represents on a global stage. When people talk about Africa, they usually focus on what's lacking or the problems on the continent. But we fail to acknowledge what's already there, the continent's influence and untapped potential. Africa is home to over 1.4 billion people. It is one of the most diverse regions on Earth with over 2,000 languages, cultures, and identity. But more importantly, this is where the future is heading. Africa's population is projected to reach nearly 2.5 billion by 2050. That means 1 in every 4 people on planet Earth will be African. Think about that for a second. While Europe and parts of Asia are aging and shrinking, Africa is doing the exact opposite. The median age in Africa is around 19 years, and in Europe it's over 40. So you have an entire generation entering the economy, building, buying, and creating, and ultimately shaping what the future of our continent is going to look like. And that tells you something super important. Africa isn't just growing, it's positioning itself to become one of the world's next major labor forces and one of the larger consumer markets at the same time. And that's before we even get into the resources. Most of us know that Africa is already a key player in the global economy. The continent holds about 30% of the world's mineral reserves, roughly 40% of the global gold, and close to 90% of the platinum and chromium. These aren't just raw materials, they're the foundation of modern industries. From energy and infrastructure to the batteries powering most of our technology today, a significant part of the future depends on what comes out of African soil. Africa isn't just on the sidelines of the global economy, it's at the center of the supply chains that's powering the future. Which is why this conversation about Africa's future is so important. Because the real question is, with all of this potential, the resources, the people, the positioning, what is actually holding Africa back? Let's start with the low-hanging fruit, the mess that is African politics. Africa has some of the longest-serving leaders in modern history. Presidents who have been in power for so long that some of the people in the country have never seen another president in their lifetimes. And on top of that, some of the wealthiest political elites on Earth exist in countries where millions of citizens are still dealing with weak infrastructure, poor healthcare systems, or lack of opportunity altogether. But I want to be more careful about using this as a blanket excuse, because a lot of people, especially outside of the continent, use this as a way to dismiss Africa entirely. But the reality is, governance in Africa isn't about the individuals, it's about the entire system. Weak governance didn't just appear out of nowhere. Many of the political systems we see today were built during colonial rule, not to develop local economies or to build countries, but to extract from them. Take, for example, the Democratic Republic of Congo. From the times of King Leopold II, the structure of the region was never designed to industrialize or build local wealth, but to extract rubber at a time when global demand was exploding. The territory was simply built to remove value as efficiently as possible, and unfortunately, throughout much of the country's history, the same pattern has continued, just with different resources. I have a whole series planned on Congo coming up, so we'll get more in depth on that. But the point is that Congo is not a unique case study. In different forms, this pattern exists across a huge part of our continent. And in many cases, those systems were never fully rebuilt. They were inherited and continued by an African elite, which is where money laundering and poor governance starts to come in. Infrastructure budgets get inflated and disappear. Contracts go to a select few instead of creating open competition. If a system is built around extraction and not development, eventually corruption stops looking like a bug in the system and starts to look like a part of the operating model itself. But again, this is not an excuse to say that Africa is finished. It's just context. Context that allows us to understand how we arrived at this point in the first place and how we can move forward. As Africans, we need to admit that our systems simply are not producing the development or the security that we need. Leaders like Muammar Gaddafi have tried to raise this issue in his writings. In the Green Book, he argued that African nations needed alternative governance systems designed around African realities that were more participatory, locally rooted, and less dependent on Western political and economic models. Because once you fix governance and improve institutions, you create stability. The stability then leads to human capacity, and once you give African countries the conditions that allow the population's consciousness to expand beyond survival mode, then they can finally start to learn skills, start businesses, build industries, and tackle the next major issue that's holding our continent back. Africa is severely sick. Economists even have a term for this: Dutch disease or the resource curse. The idea is that countries and regions with enormous natural wealth can still remain underdeveloped because they never move up the value chain. And when you look at Africa, it's hard to argue that this isn't a prime example. Africa is sitting on some of the most important resources on Earth, and yet somehow remains at the bottom of the global economy. The continent powers industries worth trillions of dollars, technology, energy infrastructure, luxury markets. A significant part of all of it begins on our continent. But here's the problem. Africa participates in the global economy mostly as a supplier of raw materials, not as an owner of the industries that are built from them. Which means the continent helps power the modern world while only capturing a fraction of the wealth being created from it. Every year, billions of dollars leave the continent through illicit financial flows, whether from corruption like mentioned before or lack of infrastructure. Take chocolate for example, an industry worth $100 billion. West Africa produces the majority of the world's cocoa, but most of the global chocolate industry profits are made in places like Switzerland, Belgium, or the United States. And ironically, we import them right back to us. That's because the real power in the global economy doesn't come from simply owning the resources. It comes from being able to transform, process, and manufacture them. Being able to refine our own oil, process our own minerals, and manufacture our own product is how you build supply chains that create jobs and industries locally. And there's already examples of this happening. In Nigeria, the Dangote refinery, despite all the debates and controversy around it, represents something very important: an attempt to process African resources locally instead of exporting raw crude oil and importing refined fuel back at higher prices. Or the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, a massive infrastructure project built and largely funded by Ethiopians themselves. It's aimed at solving long-term energy and industrial capacity issues in the region. These are just some examples of long-term projects that could shift countries from dependency towards leverage. Now imagine a version of Africa with revisited political systems, growing industries, and stronger institutions overall. To me, there's only one factor left that could bring this whole plan together. Picture this. You're a young entrepreneur in Kenya trying to expand your business into Angola. Sounds simple enough, but this is where another major African problem shows up. First, you open your laptop to book your flight, and you get hit with either super expensive tickets or a route through Europe or the Middle East. You quickly realize that you might need a visa. Yes, a place that is literally 3 countries away you need a visa for. Meanwhile, a lot of foreign passports are able to move around the continent a lot easier than Africans can. And finally, to even use your Kenyan shillings, it has to be converted first into US dollars or euros before you can convert it into Angolan kwanza. Think about how absurd that is for a second. A level of dependency so high that we struggle to move, trade, and build with each other. Now multiply that friction across 1.4 billion people and 54 countries. That's the real cost of our last issue. This is where Pan-Africanism stops being an ideal and starts becoming an economic necessity, because every major global economy has one thing in common: integration. The European Union allows relatively free movement of goods, services, capital, and people across countries, and the United States operates as one massive internal market under one currency. These places realize that scale creates power, and in our case, Africa is a continent with enormous scale potential. Unfortunately, economically and logistically, the continent doesn't operate like one connected system. The African Continental Free Trade Area was proposed in 2018 to make trade easier across the continent. If fully implemented, this could become the world's largest free trade area by number of participating countries. On paper, it changes everything, but in reality, implementation is still slow, held back by border systems, currency barriers, logistics costs, and political systems. On top of that, structure is only one part of our fragmentation issue. I think a lot of it has to do with psychology. Too often, African countries look outward first instead of looking at each other as natural partners, collaborators, and markets. And when economic pressure builds, frustration often gets redirected towards visible targets instead of the systems that are creating the pressure in the first place. When everything goes wrong, blame your neighbors. Ethnic groups, nationalities, just blame your neighbor. Which is why we've seen tensions rise in places like South Africa, for example, or why regional alliances such as ECOWAS can become politically unstable and impossible to manage. They're real economic frustrations, but redirected towards other Africans. But if Africa can truly figure out how to integrate economically, politically, and psychologically, then the scale of what this continent can achieve becomes hard to imagine. Seeing all of these problems from a different angle gave me a new perspective of Africa. I stopped seeing Africa as a place that lacked potential and started seeing it as a continent that was struggling to organize its potential. And honestly, that realization is a huge part of why I wanted to build this channel and this community in the first place. Because clearly the resources are here, the people are here, and the market is here. We've just been disconnected from each other and disconnected from our long-term interests for so long. And if that's the real issue, then we can't just sit back and expect the governments to come and save us and fix these issues for us. It means that African builders, entrepreneurs, engineers, creatives, and the people of the diaspora all have a role to play in what happens next. Because every major shift in history started with people organizing around an idea first. And if enough Africans can start thinking long-term and beyond the borders that we inherited, then we can start to make a change. And of course, we're not presidents, we're not billionaires. None of us are writing national policy today. But what we can do is shift culture, build networks, share ideas, fund projects, and slowly push the conversation in a direction that shows the world how serious we are about our agency. Because whether we like it or not, the world is changing, global power is shifting, and Africa is going to be at the center of it. The real question is, will we write our own future or just be spectators?
So you see, the future of this world is African. Allow me to say this once again a little louder for those of you in the back. The future is African.